Good morning. It's good to see you. And I will say before we start that my internet connection seems to be a little uncertain this morning. So if I just blink out mid-sentence, I will come back on my phone as soon as I can. But hopefully this will all work out. So many chances to just stay relaxed with the uncertain. We are here gathered together, partially because we can imagine each other. We can imagine each other's voices, the sound of all of our voices together at that church building on Elm Street, as Brad said. We can imagine ourselves there together. We can imagine each other sitting on our couches and our office chairs, and we can imagine the connections that are spinning through the world, a web that is stretched and flexible, maybe like the web that catches a trapeze artist, ready for the unexpected. Maybe like a spider's web, almost invisible, but strongly anchored. Maybe like this World Wide Web, connected to more things than you had imagined possible. But here we are, in the very real world, our imaginations recreating and refinding our very real connections to each and to all. Welcome in. I invite you to light your chalice or build your cairn or whatever it is that helps you stretch your imagination to hold all of the connections that you are part of. And I invite you to say the words of our covenant together. And my candle has spontaneously gone out, so I'll fire manage. Join me in the covenant. Love, the doctrine, church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to respect the nurturing power within all of us. Thus do we covenant. And I invite you to join in singing Glory, Glory, Hallelujah. The words will be in the chat.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I lay my burdens down. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Since
This reading is a poem I wrote called My Imaginary Life. For a while, I said I was a ballerina, and my little friends believed. Not one of us had ever taken a ballet class. Later, I said I would grow up to be a dolphin. I don't know if I thought that I could, and still it seems like a good idea. For a long time, I had a physical memory of flying. My arms, my back, my body remembered it. It must have been a dream. I still dream of flying sometimes, skimming through the air. The world is so beautiful. I love everything. I mostly accept it now that I have not ever flown. Arms out, buoyant and at ease in the air. But there are mornings when I step out to walk down the street, just an ordinary day, sunlight through broken clouds, gravel underfoot. I spread my arms, I tilt my head back, and the world is so beautiful. I love everything.
It is that time in our service when we open our Wonder Boxes. Children, during the pandemic, young people between the ages of 0 and 12 may sign up to have Wonder Boxes delivered to their houses. If your child is not currently on the Wonder Box list and would like to be, you can sign up by clicking the link that will appear in the chat. So let's open these Wonder Boxes. All right, what do we have this morning? I have nothing. Nothing. What? Just a piece of paper with instructions. Did I forget to pack myself a Wonder Box? Did you guys also get nothing? You did? Now I wonder why in the world would I have sent out empty Wonder Boxes? Let's see what these instructions say was supposed to be in here. I must have made a mistake. Oh, it says, wait a minute, this Wonder Box is empty. All right, okay. Oh, I see, right. Okay, today's theme is thinking outside the box. So there's nothing inside this Wonder Box. What is outside the box? Everything. The whole wide world is outside this Wonder Box. So your task today during the service is to use your creativity to make this box into something else. You can keep it as a box and add stuff to it. You could use scissors to cut it up or your hands to tear it up and use it to create something totally new. You can use anything you find outside the box around your house, with your parents' permission, of course, to think outside this box and create something new and exciting. I will check back at the end of the service, and I cannot wait to see what you imagine this box to be.
It's often like this in life. We don't always know what we have when it first is put into our hands. Joy can turn into a sorrow and then back into a joy. And sometimes things just remain uncertain and profound. This time in our service for Joys and Sorrows is a time for witness, most of all. To witness our own lives, to witness what is unfolding in us, even if we don't understand what it is. And to let ourselves feel and imagine what is happening in our lives. So I invite you to write into the chat what is happening right now, what memories are coming up in this time when so much is intensified, and also just to witness yourself and each other. So if you want to put an asterisk there so that you just can see that candle flame of witnessing, of honoring this life that we are all living together. We'll take a time for anyone who would like to write in the chat, your joy, your sorrow, whatever is unfolding. We'll settle in for some meditation, a time of stillness. But first, or as we settle into that, I offer you these words from Tess Baumberger, who is another UU minister. She entitles this meditation, or this imagination exercise, Soul Lifts. Wouldn't it be great if you could take a picture of your soul? Then when your mother wanted to brag about you, she could show people the picture and say, "This is my daughter. Doesn't she have a beautiful soul, all sparkly and many colored and flowing all around her?" Wouldn't it be great if we walked around surrounded by our souls, so that they were the first thing that people saw instead of the last things? That people would judge us by who we really are and not by how we look. Imagine no more racism, ageism, sexism, fatism, shortism, homophobia. Imagine falling in love with who a person is just by looking at them. It would be a kind of cloaking device, hiding physical faults or defects or even perfections. I would want it to be mandatory. Then people would work at making their souls more beautiful instead of their bodies or their faces. Imagine people knowing by your soul that you really need a hug. Imagine people helping each other and their souls changing colors and growing. Imagine soul gyms with exercises to get your sagging soul in shape. Imagine the long lines forming for soul lifts at churches, temples, mosques, and synagogues, or in nature's grand cathedrals. These days, I think there are ways that we can see each other's souls more clearly, see the beauty in each of us. I invite you to settle into a time of meditation, a time to notice the beauty that you carry with you all the time. The seminary I attended years ago now was on the south side of Chicago, and it was a 19th century building with dark wood and marble and sweeping staircases and small classrooms with small desks. I was frustrated most of the time with having to make do. And it was in that building that I learned playback theater, one of those dark paneled rooms with the marble fireplace. Playback theater is a kind of improvisational theater, but it isn't just people doing stand-up comedy. It's a form in which a group of people listen to a story from a teller, and then they play the story back to the person. They sometimes create the characters from the story, but sometimes they create a sculpture of what the story felt like. Sometimes one line from the story gets repeated over and over again by one person. Sometimes people pop up and say different parts at different times if the story feels scattered and energetic like that. So it's a way of improvising about real things. And part of the way of doing playback theater is not to put your own moral to the story into the story, but just show the story in a fresh way so that it can be seen and heard differently. People use this for all kinds of things, sometimes just to delight in each other's stories, and sometimes as a way to help people process difficult stories, to get some space in their heads and hearts about it. We practiced together often for at least a season. And I remember one night we were practicing doing the Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. And I think one of the reasons I remember this is that our rather intense theology professor stood on either the table or a chair during this moment and proclaimed, I have a dream, over and over again. But to see her standing on the furniture was quite delightful, even though we were enacting a story that was very profound. Other people sat on the floor and listened, and I think someone was the dream moving through the room. It was something to be inside that story, to take the story into my physical being and try to live in it for a little while. And maybe that's what our teacher was hoping when she had us enact this as one of our stories, that this moment in history that most of us had not been alive or at least very conscious for would be alive in us. And that is what the imagination offers us. It creates and finds unexpected connections, which bring joy and beauty to our lives. It allows us to inhabit stories that are not our own stories, which helps us grow our empathy for others, but then also for ourselves. And it gives us the chance to experience that we are not ever, in fact, alone with our stories, which is one of the most hopeful things we can experience. These days of extremism and pandemic, I am keenly aware that the imagination has a very dark side, that we can believe in destructive non-realities that can make people do the worst things and go to terrifying places. And I also know that our imaginations can run away with us and come up with stories in the future that may never happen. And the imagination is how we metabolize the world as it is into the world that could be. It's how we take in what is and see it from a different perspective, feel it from a different perspective. Doing playback theater with the I Have a Dream speech let me see the story differently and my teacher differently. Now I understood that in addition to being a serious and demanding theologian, she knew how to play. She knew how to reimagine with us. And that's probably what she was doing in all of her work. And it let me inhabit a story that I had always thought was a black and white newsreel, something that was an ancient marvel. Actually, it was still alive. And then I understood that. And since then, I have learned something else amazing about that speech. I'm sure I've told this story before, but it's such a good thing to know about this story. I want to tell you again. Martin Luther King had that speech all written out. He had worked with his advisors, and they had prepared thoroughly. And he stood up and gave that speech, and he had important things to say. And there was this point in this speech when there was a pause. People were applauding, and he stepped back a little, and there was this pause. And I don't think you can hear it on the tape, but in that moment, behind him, Mahalia Jackson, who was a singer that Martin Luther King turned to keep his spirit up, she said to him, "Tell them about the dream, Martin. Tell them about the dream." And he looked at her in that pause, and then he turned back to the podium and he moved his prepared speech to the side. And then he said, "I have a dream." And that is the stirring speech that we remember, that is alive in the world still. That's the part that stirs us to this day. A dream is made of many things: aspiration, vision, preparation, persistence, and imagination. What would it have been like if in our playback theater version of that speech, someone had had the role to say, "Tell them about the dream, Martin. Tell them about the dream." How the story shifts a little when we know that there was the voice of the artist, of the singer, the person who could give voice to the soul like no one else can. That voice urging him to share that deep imagining of the future, calling forth the imaginary in the service of the very, very real. My 7-year-old child spends most of his day reenacting and telling and enlisting us in imaginary stories. You hear a little bit of that happening often on Sundays. That background noise is always him telling an imaginary story. They include dogs and friends and made-up animals and traveling the world and defeating villains, always climbing mountains. The thing that I find endlessly fascinating is how he runs real life through his imaginary stories. Current events, the news, is navigated in his mind by dogs and knights, and his imaginary scenarios are peopled by his family members. His imagination is how he makes sense of an otherwise overwhelming world. The nap ministry urges us not only to rest, but in that rest time, to allow our imaginations to work, to leave them that space, that openness, to make sense of this overwhelming world, to find those connections that surprise us, to remember we don't carry our stories alone, and to begin to transform things. We got to see this week some of those artists who are always urging us to live into that imaginary, into that dream. At the inauguration, there were a couple of moments I want to reflect on with you when it comes to this. One of those artists was Lady Gaga with her fabulous red dress. And she stood up and she sang the national anthem. And I listened to her sing it and I thought, it sounds different. It feels different. There's something about the way she sang it that it felt different. And then I read that she had changed the time signature for the song. I don't really know how you do that. And maybe Taylor can tell us if the details of this music are of interest to you. But what happened is that she sort of gave each measure a little more time, so that the song felt more flowing. The song person I read said it became a rhapsody, so that it flowed and had less of a military feel and more of a generous and gentle feel. It was subtle. It wasn't big changes to the words or a whole new song. It was just a way of slightly reimagining how that song could be lived into, how we could hear that song and live with the history of that song. I appreciated the way she prepared for that and the fact that she could imagine that song being different, and then offer that to us. And then, of course, there was also the poet who just literally glowed on that morning, who spoke words about the very real world that we were living in right now. But also, she was imagining what was possible. Her standing there as the youngest poet was its own imagining of what was possible. And there are so many wonderful lines. And if you haven't gone back and read her poem yet, I hope you will. But here are just a couple of lines. Every breath from my bronze pounded chest will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. To see her standing there with those words that so many of which had risen up in response to the insurrection, to know that she could respond with creativity and imagination to even the worst we have to offer, was an inspiration and gave us those three things that imagination gives us: unexpected connections that bring joy and beauty, that reminder that we are not alone with our own story, that we weave things together. And that brings us hope. So I hope that you will find some time to rest, to put some space around everything that is happening, to let your own imagination do what it does. Maybe make a little extra space in the music. Find some words that express this life. Or even just remember your own story more deeply and how it lives in who you are. Maybe catch some breezes, joy and beauty that lift us up. Rise on the updrafts of empathy. Join a murmuration, a swooping whirl of flyers. New futures are possible. Take time to rest and imagine. In this time of gathering, we participate in another ritual that these days in particular is imaginary. Usually the offering means passing hand to hand a gift. And these days we can't do that. And still we can imagine what it means to pass among ourselves the gift of community, the gift of strength that goes beyond ourselves, the gift to the future that we make every time we nurture this present moment, this present community, the work we can do together. So if you have a bowl or a basket or a cup that you want to put something in so that you can have that very real something to go with this intangible process, this is the moment to do that. And there's a link in the chat so that you can pass that gift along in this moment if you would like to. Thank you for all of the gifts that you offer this community, gifts of imagination, and so many very real gifts. Thank you.
From you
I am ready to see what you imagined out of these wonder boxes. As you can see, mine became a hat. Hold those up to the camera so that I can flip through and see. All right, looking for some wonder boxes here. Ooh, oh, I see Simon also has a hat. And I see, oh, Sam is holding up something. Looks like she drew some pictures on hers. Very nice. All right, my Zoom is not functioning very well this morning. I'm sorry if I'm missing some other kids here. But if you, oh, there we go. I see the Francoeur kids have some, ooh, it looks like made it into a house. Very nice. And Spencer did something really cool with his. I can't tell what that is, but bring that to Stories and Sharing because I want to hear all about that. Now, sometimes in life, we have times when we feel that what we have been given is not enough. If you are a kid, you might be feeling bored, stuck in your house all the time because of COVID. You might feel confused by your schoolwork, feel like Zoom school is just not enough, you're not getting it, and like you don't have the right things in your brain to get this done. The box that is your house is boring, and the box that is your school is confusing. If you are an adult, you might feel stuck in your job or your social life. The box of your job is oppressive. The box of your social life is empty. You probably also feel like COVID is keeping you stuck in that box that is your home. When we start feeling like we are stuck in our boxes, or that our boxes have nothing in them, remember that a box is just cardboard shaped into a rectangle. The box may be empty, or boring, or small, or stifling, but outside the box, there is everything. Outside the box is the whole wide world, and there are always ways to think outside your box. How will you use your imagination this week to think outside the boxes of the current moment?
Before we go out into the wind and sunshine of this day, I invite you to say our benediction together, a blessing for each person and a blessing for us together. And then I hope you can stay for some coffee hour conversation. But if you can't, we send you with our blessing. Go in peace. Speak truth. Give thanks each day. Respect the earth and all creatures, for they are alive like you. Care for your body. It is a wondrous gift. Be gentle with yourself. Live simply. Be of service. Be guided by your faith and not your fear. Go lightly on your way. Walk in a sacred manner.